Hi there, this is an animation After Effects tutorial, and it goes into using Puppet Warp pins and moving those pins through time and having After Effects track that motion and add keyframes for you when the object moves or the pin makes the object move. I've brought in some illustrations that I've made in Illustrator, and you can work with Photoshop or Illustrator, and make sure that you bring in your files with a transparent background. So that's an Illustrator file, Photoshop file, AIs, PSDs, PNGs, GIFs, TIFFs, any kind of file that has a transparent background or travels with transparency will work. And you can bring those into your project window, pop them into a composition, and have pins positioned around your object and have the pins move while you are tracking the motion in After Effects. And After Effects, in essence, adds the keyframes for you. So that's what I'm going to go through in this tutorial. Hi there. This is an After Effects tutorial. I have an After Effects animation playing here. I'm just going to close up a couple of those layers. For this animation, I created some content in Illustrator, and I'm just going to boogie on over to Illustrator for a second and show you the file that I've used, and we'll just wait for Illustrator to pop up. So I've got some original artwork that I created with, I think it's like Conte, some pen and ink on kind of dirty paper, and that is this guy here. So that is the original drawing. I brought it into Illustrator, the scan, and I also brought some photographs of medals, like army medals that I found in my dad's stuff, and I scanned them and brought them in. And I did an image trace and a bunch of, added some color to some of the layers, and you can see the progression. Just my Illustrator is going a little bit pokey, but here is the original guy that was, he's an image trace, but then I added some extra vector-based shapes and colors, swatches in Illustrator, and you can see this is all vector. All of the stuff is vector. So the file was output. Each one of them was output in an art box or in an artboard, and that's the size. So every one of them is the same size, and they were all imported into After Effects. So I'll go back to After Effects. And they were all imported into After Effects, and they're laid out on the screen, or the timeline. Got guy 4, guy 2, guy 3, and guy 5. So each one of them has their own, or are playing on their own layer, and they're playing in succession, and they're animated by, and you can see the sneer happening with this guy, or his hair is moving a little bit. Those are the illustrations, those 5 illustrations that I brought in from Illustrator. They're animated with Puppet Warp, and I'm going to pull in, so Command plus, a little bit here, and I'm going to move over to the text. We'll see how well this is going to show up. So right now you're seeing the pins on the text, and this is Puppet Pins layer. This is a type layer, and I've got the mesh showing up on the eye only. I've got my pins, the pins are yellow, and the ones that are active, these two, the dark yellow, those are the ones that I just animated. So pinning and animating with pins, just stop this here and show you the way that the pins are pulling the letters around. We've got pins, and we'll wait until the playhead moves back to the text. I've got pins, and I've pinned the areas that I want to stay stable, and I've used pins in time to pull out the shapes to animate those letters. And you can see on the eye, we've got the mesh being shown. So that's up here, mesh, show mesh. So I've got the mesh, and you can see on the P, you can see on this other P and this other P. You can see how the mesh works. We'll have that activated, or just wait until the playhead comes around. So this is how the U is being animated, and you can see the extension. And you can see that if there are improper, or there is improper pinning happening, you can see that the shape isn't quite sticking together. So here we come again on those letters. You can see how the U is extending. So improper pinning is not going to allow the full shape to move up. So I would have to add more pins along that edge and select them all at once and bring them all up at the same time. So that's what I've done here. And you can see it extends, but if there was a third pin, if this was a little bit of a heavier mesh, or there were more triangles, I could add a couple more pins and make sure that that stayed straight instead of the pins pulling either side down. So how did I do that? I'm going to just turn this mesh off. How did I do that? So I'm going to go Command minus to get out of there, and I'm going to take a look at just this little guy. This is a map placer, or a map marker, that I created for a logo for a newspaper that I was working on, and decided, okay, I'm gonna use this for my animation. So this is a vector-based object. There are three shapes: the teardrop shape, the circle that's white, and the circle that is black. These are all created in Illustrator. It's one Illustrator file, and I've output it as a PNG, and it has no background. So that's transparency. It's coming in with transparency. Just to point out, the Guy 1, Guy 2, Guy 3, Guy 4, Guy 5, they're AI files. They don't have any background behind them, so they came in with transparency as well. Number one, how did I do the animation? So what is pinning? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to the logo, and that is this one right here. And the animation was created with your typical movement. And I'll just open that up. Just close up the effects for a second. So you can see my keyframes. So this object is moving and rotating. So you can see he's moving. So we've got position and rotation. So the position and rotation of the object is moving in time, right? So you can see that movement. And I've also got, to close up transition and open up effects, I've got puppet, and in Photoshop it's called puppet warp. You use pins and you can move the pins around. You use pins to make something stay stable in some areas, and you use pins to morph other areas. So people have been using pinning or puppet warp for a while to make people look longer and thinner, or to make their eyes look larger, or pull in their cheeks for editorial photography. In After Effects, we can use pinning in time across the timeline and have something animate. So this object, it's got pins, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to select that object, and I'm going to click on the pin tool, and I'm going to, I'll bring in a new pin. So I'll pin this object, and I've pinned right on that black center. And you can see that I'm moving, when I'm moving the object, the pins that I have on the object already, I'll just put that right back. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pins that were already present before I put in that fifth pin. Deleting a pin, I can click on the pin and delete. So you can see I've deleted a pin. The pin that is making this object move the most is this one. So that one is mesh 1. So every time I add a pin, it's going to add another mesh. Let's check it. So puppet pin 5 is, let's see, puppet pin 5 is not moving. This is puppet pin 3, 2, and puppet pin 1. This is puppet pin 1 right here, as you can see. This is the movement that was tracked, and I'll zoom in. So it's like other tracking movements, like the movement that the whole object is making. So the whole object moves from one position and it kind of swoops around, and this is the final position. And while that full object is moving through space, it's also rotating. This pin is moving through space, so it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. It's pulling open, closed, etc. And that motion was tracked by After Effects while I was moving it. So that's pretty cool that you can do this. So I'm going to go out, zoom out a little bit, and I'm just going to play the area that we can see that object moving around. And the pins are revealed, so you can see how the pins are keeping some of the object still. And that one pin, that's pin number 1, the pin number 1 is the one that's moving. So the other pins are keeping that object in place. So I'll just let the animation do its CPU render. It's going pretty slow because there's a lot going on. So I'll just let that render, and then I will move back and now let it play. So you can see how quickly that object is moving. And of course, the pin number 1 is moving right here. And then a little later, the whole object is moving around. So I'll start it again. Okay, so we'll stop it there. And I will close up some of those layers, swirl them closed, and select nothing. And I'm going to close up or turn the view off for those rulers. So not the rulers, sorry. Turn off the guides. So I don't want to see those guides. And I'm going to deselect so that I don't see any of those bounding boxes. So the CPU is just rendering. And I'll just stop right here and play. So this is playing in real time. So we've got the puppet pins dictating how the objects are moving and what parts of the objects are still. So you can see the guy's hair is moving around. So one of the layers has pins only on the hair and areas to stabilize. Those little markers, those orange markers, those ones are moving in space. So I'll just let this render. And I'll just play the animation through once. And then go back to comp 1, which is my animation here. So that's a comp that was thrown in. So this is comp 1 right here. So I'll go to comp 1 and I'll show you how that one is moving through space and how the pins are being used on it, and then I'll do it live. So here's the animation. I'll just let it end. That knee disappears, and I'll stop it. Okay, so I'm going to go to comp 1 and open it up and show you what's happening with that small orange marker, or like a little fish marker. I'll show you what's happening on the screen. So I'm going to play it and we'll let it render, and it looks like it's going pretty fast. So, oh, now it slows down a little. So it's just going to need to go through once, and then I'll just let it play in real time. So this is still rendering. And the pins, of course, are visible. So you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pins. And mainly it's that tip of the point pin that is really moving. Plus the object is being transformed. The position, scale, and rotation are moving in time. Okay, so here he comes. So this is more or less real time. You can see that center, the black object is moving slightly, but mainly it's this pin that's doing all of the action, or all the action is on him. So if I open up the mesh, you will see that we've got a couple of things going on. We've got the pins. Each one of them under deform has its own position layer on the timeline. We've got the position in time that that pin has been moved. So that's the keyframe. So the keyframes for pin 1. So we'll take a look at pin 1. So this is pin 1. This is the tracked motion of that pin. The motion line here is the full object. This is pin 1. That's the movement on that one. And pin 6, that is this one. So this one jiggles up and down a little bit. So how was that created? So I'm going to create a new file, or a new comp for this file, and I'm going to bring in this it's called logo spot. I'll bring in the logo spot again, and I'll do it live. So I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to create a new comp, so a new composition, and just leave it at the same length, etc. I'm going to grab my logo spot, drag him into the comp, and show you, yes indeed, he's here. And I'm going to start adding pins to this object. And it doesn't matter where my playhead is at this point, it can be anywhere because I'm not animating yet. So I'm going to start adding pins to this object. So I've added 1, 2, 3, 4 pins. I'm going to select pin number 1, and I'm going to put the playhead at the beginning of the timeline, and I'm going to press Command and start moving. And you can see that the playhead is moving. The playhead is moving through time while I'm moving this object around. And now I'm going to stop moving it there. And you can see that After Effects has placed the keyframes where the movement is happening, like the key movement. So whenever I have moved the object, it's just placed a keyframe. So this is what the animation looks like. And almost immediately it's ready to be transformed in other ways, or it renders pretty quickly too. So here's the object, and you can see if I pull it too much, so right about here, let's see where that happened, right here, see how I'm pulling it a little too far? That pin is like really like going, oh my god, that's terrible, you're gonna pull this whole area apart, it's gonna start deforming. So the pins help you to not deform your object. So if I were to put in some more pins, or if I were to move this one in time somewhere, so I'm going to select this pin, and I'm going to press Command, and it should start working. Okay, here we go. So I'll pull it a little bit back and forth and see if I can help that movement a little bit. And you can see the outline of the object is deforming a little. So now I've got both of those pins moving at once, and I could add more pins or move the pins around. So that can work as well. And again, I'll go back at the beginning of my timeline. I've put my playhead at the beginning of the timeline. I'm going to select another pin and just show you again how After Effects will track the motion for you through time and add keyframes for you. So I'm going to press Command and go. This is going to be really, really morphy. Okay, so that center pin is the one that I'm using. Okay, that's going to really be distorted. You can see the outline. The outline is really, it's pretty ugly. So that is just a little too much. It's a little too much for the small amount of pins that I have on this object. So I'm moving this pin just a little too much. You can see that it's squooshing. So it's deforming the object too much. So I'm going to press Command Z and just show you that I have now taken off the action on that pin altogether. And I can start again if I want to. So that is, in essence, puppet pinning or puppet pin, puppet warp, which is what it's called in Photoshop, and puppet warping over time. So what you could use is the idea that these are joints. Let's say this was a real puppet and we had a head, a neck, the shoulders, the arms, etc. And where the joints are, you could place your pins and you could use the pins to stop action and use the pins to create movement, and then the joints would keep the rest of the object stable. Like your hand, your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder. If you were to create in Illustrator a bunch of objects, one hand, forearm, top of the arm, and the shoulder, you could pin all of those objects together and then in essence have the arm move around. Same thing with the fingers, same thing with the whole body, same thing with mouths, eyes, etc. So you can create your objects knowing how you would like them to move in After Effects. So in this case, I've got just one singular PNG, so it's a file that has transparency, and I brought it in as a whole object and I'm moving it, and you can see how like kind of really organic the movement can be. So if I close the puppet up, so that's just the puppet I want to close up, so the effect, and I now start to play with the transform tools and move this thing through space, I can do that. So I can like put keyframes in, keyframe where I want to, or move the playhead far up the timeline and start moving this object around. You can see that I can move it in space and have it move through time and rotate it. W is the key command, rotate it, and V is the key command to get back to the move tool, transform tool, whatever you want to call it. The Adobe Creative Suite, or CC, uses the same tool, selection tool, and in Photoshop I believe it's called the move tool. So you can see this thing is moving, the full object is moving, and the puppet pin is moving as well, moving some of the object. So you can see it's searching through time and space for something. It's a wanderer. Okay, so that's it. So I'll go back to the guy puppet and again show you how these objects are being brought in to the timeline. So we'll just play a little bit for you. And that is puppet warp, puppet pinning, puppet warping, and having After Effects track the movement over time. Hi there, so this is wrapping up the puppet warp or puppet pin video. So the animation that I've created has the objects that I created in Illustrator brought in from the project window into a comp. I've got another comp playing in the animation. I've got the puppet warp on my military dude. I've got the puppet warp on the little location pointers. Okay, I've turned off the puppet pins text layer. I'll just show you where that was. That was right around here. So there it is. So I'm going to turn that one off for the render, or just to clean up the space a little bit here. So that's off. And you can see that when the video is playing or the animation is playing, the shape seems to be morphing. So what I did there is I have, number one, I've added a texture. So this is my texture. Hello. Want that open. Here's the texture. So this is the texture that is laid over my background. Back to my composition. So that's the texture. And it's rotated in space. So you can see it's rotated. So this is the object back here. I've got a blending mode. So we've got the color burn. So this is color burn. That's color burn that is on that texture that is laid over my shape layer. And the shape layer is right here. That's at the very bottom. And that shape layer has, lock this little guy. So this is the shape layer right here. This is pink fill, fuchsia, and it has a twist applied to it. So this twist has been added from the flyout menu for add for the contents of that layer, which is a shape layer. So it's a rectangle that has a twist on it. So that twist is changing over time. So that twist, the angle of the twist is changing, and you can see while I'm scrolling through how that twist is affecting the object. Okay, so I will start playing from here and let the animation render itself, CPU render and RAM render, playing from RAM 26 out of 450. So it is, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that animating itself. Ta-da! So here is the animation starting. Got a rectangle. I'm trying to say that this is a little doorway that the animation is going to enter through. It's entering from, so this is a comp that's entering from this deep dark doorway. We've got these two location signifiers coming in, and they're moving around, fishing for a place to land. We've got the military guy starting to come into view, this kind of evil army guy with plenty of medals, and the animation on this ellipse for his mouth that has the puppet pins in it, and the puppet pins are changing the shape or the nature of the outline of the shape over time. And I'm just going to let that render, and I'm going to play it. Okay, so that's where I'll end, and that's it for my puppet tutorial that has some little beefy extras in here for our 4th session of After Effects.